connection. And it seems to me that radio plays an important role in that right now, given that people can call me live in the studio and interact with me. And I've developed over the course of this is, I guess, part of the leadership aspect of it, what I'm calling quarantine themes. So every day of the week, we're doing something else for people to look forward to just change it up. You know, when you see that It's Tuesday is a trending topic on Twitter, it's given people this sort of lack of a bearing. And the moniker for our radio station, or the slogan in the best of times, is different is good. But we've kind of jokingly been saying normal is good through this. So me showing up every day, me going through the ritualistic benchmarks that I have on my show, developing these different daily themes. Today was Tear It Up Tuesday, where it was like an hour and a half of punk and soul music to dance around your kitchen to. Tomorrow's Wanderlust Wednesday, where, you know, we can't go anywhere, but people are calling in and going on social media to request songs about where they would like to go in their mind. So in that regard, I think imagination is a really important part of leadership in this. None of us have any idea about anything like this previous in our lifetime, and none of us really know where we're going day to day. So relying on imagination and coming up with fun and creative ideas has been a really important part of this from my radio perspective and from my perspective with the Shea, which I'll get to in a minute. But, you know, you would think in the midst of what could amount to the second Great Depression in this country, people wouldn't necessarily have as generous a spirit. They'd be wanting to hold tight to their dollars. But when another panelist, Joanne Marqusee and Cooley Dickinson Hospital, reached out to the radio stations and said, can we do a fundraiser for, you know, for PPE for the people that are working at the hospital, we got imaginative and we decided to take that on, and that was hugely successful. So I guess saying yes to and rethinking everything that we know is the best outcome of this from my life on the radio. Knowing that people are relying on us and trying to amplify that more and to lean into that even further has been exhausting, but invigorating. And the other, you know, so we're my show is a mostly music show that does interviews as well. And we're a part of the creative economy in the area, I like to think. And given that that has largely fallen apart, there are no concerts happening, having to figure out in my other role as the president of the board of the Shea Theater, how to fundraise and to keep that in people's minds throughout the duration of this is why I'm dressed like an astronaut today. You know, we can't get any revenue from shows potentially throughout the course of the rest of 2020. And so we've been doing an online musical performance thing, as so many other venues and artists have done, called Quarantunes, because I will not let a pun get past my mind without totally exploiting it. And then the other thing that we're doing and why I'm dressed as an astronaut today is when Governor Baker said you can sell to-go beer and wine, and we knew we had cases and cases of wine left over that we were hoping to serve to customers at shows, we're doing what I'm calling a liquidation sale. So we're selling the wine out of the front door of the Shea starting in 2 hours. And I, dressed as an astronaut with my full face shield helmet, which is like my own protective gear and gloves, etc., will deliver the wine to your car, with the loophole that it's got to be with food. So we're also throwing in like a tiny little bag of popcorn with it. And we got a donation of beer from a brewery in Holyoke called Loophole Brewing to kind of play into the whole exploiting the loophole. So I would say that in a time when everything seems out of whack and out of control, if you can lean into your imagination for whatever field you're into, it's worked for what I'm doing in two different regards, and perhaps it's something that can work for you. This gives us an opportunity. Some people are calling it the great pause, to rethink everything that we're doing and to try those things that you've always wondered about whether you should try. If not now, when? So lean into your imagination is what I would say as far as advice for leadership. Now I'll go on mute.
Thank you so much. I know what I'm doing this afternoon. I'm driving to the Shea. So thank you, Monte. So Jessica, you're up next, and working for a public health organization. I'm sure this is really interesting times for you. So.
Yes. Yeah, I love that, Monte. Thank you. And for keeping us all laughing and dancing in our kitchens. Thank you, Laura, for having me. I'm a proud LPV alum of the inaugural class. And of course, at the Public Health Institute of Western Mass, we were quite taken aback when this pandemic hit the scene. And it took us a week or so to figure out how do we need to jump into action. And we basically picked 4 strategies that were communication, advocacy, a focus on trying to build up our 413 Cares online resource database, and what we understand to be absolutely the #1 resource need is food. And so we immediately tried to put our Go Fresh mobile market, which is typically a summertime resource for people, into gear, and it's now delivering food, obviously off season, and we're delivering groceries, etc., to housing sites in Springfield. And so what I've learned, and I love your lean in, Monte, I would agree with that. The first thing that we kind of did that got a lot of attention was a Blink Your Light campaign. And that really just came from this deep sense of confusion and loss, and we felt like we needed to do something hopeful. And that did grab many people's attention. It's a Blink Your Light at 8 p.m. every night to thank healthcare workers. And then when we started to dig in a little bit deeper about what we are anticipating to be health inequities with regard to COVID-19, and that some communities will certainly be hit harder than others, and we're seeing that now. Older folks in nursing home, living facilities, etc. We're seeing from nationally in the Boston area data around communities of color. We started to dig in deeper around advocacy, and there is an equity task force at the statewide level that is pushing for advocacy around decarceration of folks, collection of data, demographic data, so that we can understand better who is being affected by this disease. Emergency paid time off legislation, which was passed last week. And issues like that we know would affect the communities that are, quote, more vulnerable. And so that has been extremely helpful. And I think what we learned very early on was that our Western Mass delegation was looking to us in some way to help them figure out what do we need in Western Mass. And that has led us to kind of lean in a little bit more. And now we are going to be joining with Partners in Health, which is the statewide entity that's doing all the contact tracing, which is extremely important for us to, when the governor decides to open up, to understand how do we understand who has tested positive, who they have touched, how do we trace and track people, and more importantly, help them with resources that they might need. And so we will be joining Partners in Health as a Western Mass convener for people that are involved with contact tracing and really trying to support folks as best we can with resources, which leads me to the 4th strategy, which is really the buildup of this 413cares.org online resource database that we are getting the word out about. And also we are being sought to put organizations' resources up in a timely fashion, information that's being updated daily. We encourage everyone to use it. It's folks like us, for your families, whoever you are. It's an opportunity to learn about real-time resources that are available. So we went from the first week, which was more about, wow, where can we step in, to a place where we are probably 7 weeks later of there's just no stopping. We could go in so many different directions. But really, because our hope focus is grounded in health equity, we were able to somewhat narrow our strategies to say, you know what, we need to continue to focus on those that are most vulnerable and do what our mission is really about, which is to even the playing field and make sure that we all get through this together. And so that's what we've been. I've obviously been learning a lot about leadership, and I'm just, grateful to be here with this wonderful panel today.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you for all you're doing. And it's just so interesting watching everybody and how we're pivoting and figuring out where we can best apply our talents. And it's happening across industry and across organizations. So thank you. Justin, as being close to local government, talk to us about how you're leading and what you're seeing.
Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you, LPV. As an alumni of LPV, it's always a pleasure to be back in front of you. I just want to start off by thanking everybody that's on the panel. Even speaking to what Monte discussed earlier, radio, I don't know where I would be without radio. One of the things that we have to do as elected officials is to make sure that we're still communicating the information that our constituents need on a regular basis. And radio is now one of those platforms that certainly I'm utilizing. And so I'm on the radio just about every day. And then secondly, Jessica, we can't thank you enough. It's not enough to just be on the radio, but you have to provide folks with the resources necessary and actually have a platform or a database or a website or somewhere to direct them. And your website is very comprehensive and robust, and one where they can access all of the information in one place. So we certainly appreciate your efforts as well as so many others. I'll just start off by saying this is, leading during these times is different. This is everything that my mother would probably tell me not to do. I get to be in front of you and in front of my colleagues in a sweatsuit and sneakers, and not having have gotten a haircut in over a month. But no, all seriousness aside, I mean, it's not easy. And I think once you recover from the reality that government has to continue because people need government to proceed, then you can start to move forward. And what I found helpful is that you have to be selfless. This has been pretty humbling for me. There are people now in government who I now have to work with because you want to present a unified front to the citizens of Springfield. And so many of you who know me, or if you don't know me, I'm usually pretty critical. I'm usually outspoken. I'm usually vocal. When I see something wrong, I like to highlight the fact that it's wrong, and then I want to reinforce that it's wrong. But during a time like now, I don't necessarily think that is always effective. And so I needed to swallow my pride, and I needed to have conversations with some of the people that I've told publicly, might need or should resign. And so I built some really strong ties with some of those same individuals, because we're all operating on with the same purpose and goal in mind. And that's the one, figure out how we can continue to have government function. And then two, how can we adequately provide our constituents with the resources that they need so that they can continue to operate. And so even when I am critical of the administration, it usually is purposeful. It's usually with an understanding that, you're going to have to really dig deep and be in the trenches with those same individuals, the very next day. Next, we've had to be adaptive. Anybody who knows the makeup of our city council, it's difficult for folks to not have a platform. And so one of the things that we had to do quickly was to realize that we still needed to meet, and we still needed to have an avenue to conduct the business of the council. And so rallying everyone, while Zoom might be familiar for folks who are not in government, if you're dealing with individuals who might be 40 and above, which includes myself, adapting to new technology is not easy at all. And so while you have 30 to 40 on the screen here, Laura, that's pretty impressive, but it was difficult for me to get 13 on the screen all at the same time. And so we certainly, we were able to get through that hurdle, but in doing that, we needed to make sure that we were deliberating and then deliberating in an open format, and also complying with the open meeting law. So we were able to work in conjunction with Focus Springfield, who has been an amazing ally and has allowed our meetings to continue to go according to plan, or as best as could be, and also provide that information to the public. We also have needed to step up and be communicative in terms of our leadership on the city council. I think we all have a responsibility to make sure that our constituents are as informed as possible. I see I have 1 minute, Laura. I'll try to wrap it up. To make sure that they're as informed as possible, and so that's what we've tried to do. Whether it's via radio, via town halls, we've tried to do everything that we can do in our power to make sure that they are informed. And then lastly, moving forward, we're probably going to need some courageous leadership. Everybody wants a platform. Everybody wants a microphone, especially on the city council. But we're going to have to make some tough decisions in terms of, what are the things that we can do in operating in the best interest of the citizens of Springfield. You can't please everybody. And right now, we're going to have to make some tough decisions. And so you have to do it strategically and do it wisely. So I look forward to hearing from the rest of you on the panel. And thank you for having me, Laura.
Thank you, Justin, and thanks for your leadership. This is, we're all figuring this out as we go along, and I appreciate your comments about just being able to, in government, trying new technologies. We don't always think of those things going together, so I appreciate that you guys have figured out how to move those things along. Thank you. So our next speaker is Joanne Marqusee from Cooley Dickinson, and we appreciate all of your leadership and all that you all are going through. I mean, you guys are 100% essential. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Laura. I think that I'm going to divide this into sort of two phases. The first few weeks and then what happened after that. And if my guess is you're all feeling what I'm feeling, which is a sense of time being really warped these days, what really happened a long time ago versus a week ago. But at the beginning of this, I would say as a leader, it was really overwhelming. The number of decisions that we had to make and make quickly with such limited information and inconsistent information was exhausting for all my leaders. The willingness in a hospital to set up a kind of command center and to pivot into really not having a lot of discussions about things just because we had to decide so quickly. And that's not something we're used to. We like to develop consensus. We obviously have a lot of people with different opinions and perspectives, and we didn't have the time to listen to all those and to feel comfortable to do that, but also feel open to constantly changing what our decisions were, took some getting used to. The other thing that I was particularly worried about is burnout. Although none of us could see what this would be like, it was obvious it was not like a power outage or a snowstorm that you get over in a week, that this was going to be long term. And so people were running in so quickly to do things and work so hard 7 days a week that I really worried, particularly in a hospital our size, which we don't have tons of layers of people and redundancy, that people would just burn out. And so I had to get unusually prescriptive and literally tell people, this weekend in the following hours, nobody is allowed to email, call, or text unless it's truly an emergency. Like the decisions have to be made then. And just making sure people were switching off who was in charge, who was staffing the command center, et cetera. But then after that, it really, when we sort of got our bearings and had a process in place and kind of knew what we were doing, I would say as a leader, my job really changed to be so focused on communication. And obviously communication is always a really important part of leadership, but so much communication externally. and recognizing that the community was looking to us, not only for information about what Cooley was doing, but also looking for us to be a credible source of information about the virus, about what was really appropriate to do and not, and feeling comfortable, particularly as a non-clinical leader of a hospital, to give that information out because we had the credibility and we had the people were looking to us to say, should we wear a mask? Should I get tested? Explaining to people why we didn't have enough tests, all of that, and knowing how frustrated and scared people were, and that we wanted to give them a sense of assurance while not losing credibility and not seeming like we had all the answers. And then usually leadership is about making sure people are focused on the right things. So you don't want people hyper-focused on one or two issues and they sort of let other important things go by the wayside, but you don't want people focused on so many things that you don't get anything done. And so this was unusual that for so many of my leaders and staff, they really had one job, all focused on COVID. And so identifying the few people who need to think about other things, because there will be a long recovery period, and this has had a huge financial impact, was important, but also giving a whole bunch of people permission to be so singularly focused because their brains couldn't possibly have the sort of strength and the wherewithal to focus on other things and not completely exhaust themselves. And then while all organization leaders are worrying about their staff and worrying about what's going to happen financially and making sure they're communicating, we have that extra layer in a hospital of people coming to work and being really scared that they are going to catch the virus, bring it home to their family. And I have to say, I've been amazed at how almost to a person people have just run into the fire. But recognizing that regardless of how brave they are being, that doesn't take away their anxiety and their fears. And so how can we as leaders just keep making sure to show appreciation, but also acknowledging that this is really scary. And although the community keeps calling them heroes, that's not what they mainly feel. They are constantly aware of their own inability to cure everybody, inability to make it all right for the person who is ill in the hospital and unable to have a visitor come and see them. They just feel all the things that they aren't able to do, and making that be okay. And while recognizing that as much as I can say as a leader, I understand and I appreciate, I can never really know what that's like. And I think we have to respect that there's just a limit to what non-clinical people who aren't on the front lines can ever know, and that it's not helpful to pretend that we completely understand. So, I think that now for the long term, what are we looking towards? It's going to be a whole other set of leadership challenges about recovery, and particularly about a very, very difficult time, both how do we do this clinically and convince and truly be safe for the community to come back for care. How do we make sure that we protect our staff? How do we get people to continue to focus on the social distancing and the masking, so that we don't have a huge second phase or third phase? But there will also be really tough financial decisions and the implications of this for what we are going to be long term. But just to end on a little bit happier note, there are definitely some silver linings of things that have happened that I think will change how we are permanently. Certainly telehealth. I don't think that is ever going to go back to how it was, and Massachusetts has been behind the rest of the country in embracing and paying for telehealth. So I hope that this will change that, and people will see that they can get care without coming to the office, and perhaps we can care for more people in that way. And then the creativity that we've seen, how frontline staff can on a dime turn and figure out how to do something they've never done before. And so I think as leaders, how do we harness that and make sure when we start to put the somewhat bureaucratic steps we usually have in place back in the mix, that we don't go too far on that, because we've seen people come up with some really incredibly innovative ways to do things, and we want to continue to allow them to do that. So thank you to all of you, because people have been so supportive, and we feel it, and it really makes a difference, and it makes this really challenging time a little bit easier. Thanks.
Thank you, Joanne. And I just want to highlight, because I really appreciate your saying, making sure people are focused on the right things at the right time, and recognizing how overwhelming this is, and you know, having some people work on one thing so that other people can focus on another thing, I think is really important, because we think we can multitask, but redoing our whole lives is also happening at the same time. So that really struck me, and I appreciate creativity has come up again, and it's coming up repeatedly. So I'm going to introduce Christina Royal, who's also on our board of directors, who's at Holyoke Community College, and I know the colleges are all rethinking and having to really shift at this time.
Yeah, thank you, Laura, and thank you to my fellow panelists. It's amazing to see how our community is coming together. I also want to thank LPV for everything that you do, Laura, to create strong leaders in our community. And since it's Giving Day, Giving Tuesday, I would definitely encourage you to think about giving to LPV so they can continue to make events like this possible for the greater community. COVID-19 has certainly created unprecedented challenges for the community colleges and public higher education in general. The disruption to face-to-face learning has had a dramatic effect on our first generation and low-income learners specifically. And as you know, many of our students face challenges such as hunger and homelessness on a regular daily basis outside of COVID. And many of them rely on our food pantries, our computer labs, our libraries, childcare services, very valuable in-person support services. And this was before the pandemic. So now we know that what we're seeing in the community is that our low-income, marginalized individuals are communities of color are being disproportionately impacted by this pandemic. We've responded by purchasing Chromebooks and hotspots for students and really helping with having the technology for them to transition and have access to laptops and internet access from their homes. We've also had to support faculty in their transition to ensure proper understanding of pedagogy and what does remote learning mean, and helping students also understand these transitions for those that signed up to attend in person. And, we know that there's also all these other services that we tend to offer that we've had to increase, remote mental health services, and also students who are graduating this year and are thinking about transfer and now are questioning a lot of the decisions that they've made. So we really had to support students in that way. Also though, community colleges are a primary player in workforce and regional economic development. We are an economic engine collectively at community colleges and HCC specifically in our community. And 85% of first responder training is provided by community colleges. So we need to also be thinking about what our communities look like post-COVID and how we're able to help transition our workforce and support our healthcare and hospitals and agencies that are providing these frontline workers. So I realized that these times called for leadership that I would kind of characterize three pieces that I focused on: coordinated, decisive, and caring. In terms of coordination, it requires a lot to get thousands of people moving in sync with one another. We have 1,000 employees, 4,500 credit students this semester, and about 2,000 non-credit students this spring. And really require daily communication, sometimes multiple messages in a day, certainly everybody working 7 days a week at the beginning to ensure that students, employees in the community were aware of all the decisions that had to be made. And keeping everybody in the loop and connected was really intense. employees, students, community leaders, legislators, the Department of Higher Education, the Executive Office of Education, the Mass Emergency Management Agency, the Department of Public Health, the K-12 schools, the Mayor's Office, my own Board of Trustees. There are a lot of stakeholders in education, and ensuring good decisions also means that there's communication and engagement with all the respective folks. Another piece is decisiveness. Decisions such as complete disinfection of the campus, shifting employees to remote work, decisions around shifting faculty and students to remote teaching, whether we should offer pass-fail options to students and the implications for that, extensions on withdrawal dates, how to distribute food and equipment to students while keeping our staff protected, restricting access to the physical campus, donation of PPE equipment to communities, donation of food to community agencies, and even decisions about commencement and what we'll be doing for this coming fall. So there's also policy changes we've had to focus on. I created a student emergency fund when I first arrived to support students who had disruptions in their semester that could potentially derail them for the educational journey. And the kinds of requests that we're seeing now are so different. We got a request from a student who said, I don't have a desk to study at home. And so we bought them a desk. So, I mean, it's easy to forget some very rudimentary basic things about comfort and home when you think about being able to continue your studies in a situation like this. And then the last piece is caring. So, to quote Teddy Roosevelt, nobody cares about how much you know until they know how much you care. I really tried to make sure that my communications to employees and students demonstrated a focus on putting their health and well-being first. And then also, though, a message of positivity and getting through this together and reminding people the upside of crisis and lots of expressions of gratitude. During the times of uncertainty, there's a high degree of anxiety, and people need hope. As humans, we like predictability, and we like our routines, and we like certainty about the future. And there's already so much fear out there that I wanted to counterbalance that with hope and positivity. I also believe that there's a lot of innovation that's birthed from crisis, and I'm thinking about and engaging folks internally about how HCC can facilitate the healing and the progression of our community when this is over. And then lastly, we also held a wellness day and hosted a community gathering and asked everyone to focus on themselves for the day and what they could do to recharge so that they had the energy and mental fortitude to be able to continue to support students with great needs. And that was a good event, bringing people together to share ideas about how to make sure that they're prioritizing self-care while also helping others. So it's certainly been a amazing experience, an overwhelming experience, but also a very humbling experience.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you for your leadership and your thoughts on compassion and gratitude. So important for a leader. And in these uncertain times, people feeling like they're being cared for is so crucial. So thank you. And last but not least, somebody who is caring for our communities as well, Katie Allen Zobel from the Community Foundation of Western Mass.
Thanks, Laura. And thanks to LPV, the LPV community. We're so, I really appreciate being invited, and appreciate all of you in this community who are focused on leadership as a priority for our community. it's so important now more than ever. That's obvious. And I'm not sure how much more I can add to what all of these fantastic panelists have said. I admire all of you, and I've been taking notes. I think with Monte starting us off with imagination and creativity, and I've heard innovation, and I see that as a real theme coming through during this time. Just quick context. Laura told you how long I've been at the Community Foundation, but like everyone else, this is not an experience we've been through. And the Community Foundation, for those of you who don't know, we're about 30 years old, and we have been providing grants and scholarships to the community in kind of pretty much sort of for the last 10 years in a very methodical, careful way. We are, I would say, slow and careful is the way we approach our work, to do it really well and to check all our boxes and make sure that we're entrusted with dollars from others in the community who want us to distribute those dollars where it's needed most. And we want to be really mindful of stewarding those dollars well and being super careful with them. So on March 13th, we could see that there's going to be some major impact to our community, and we weren't exactly sure what that would be. We launched the COVID Response Fund for the Pioneer Valley. We didn't know where we were going to get any money to put in this fund, and we did it on sort of faith and trust that this community is incredibly generous and really responds to helping their neighbors and friends, both known and unknown. And within a few days, we had an incredible gift from MassMutual of $1 million. And we've raised over close to $4.5 million to date. And I say raised, but really it's been an outpouring of support from hundreds of individuals and businesses and foundations from across the state supporting. And so the context is that the foundation has been pretty general about how it provides support to the community. We haven't been as focused in a particular area, and we've been very careful and methodical in the way we approach our giving. Well, in an emergency, that isn't, as Joanne said, that really resonated with me, Joanne, about you're making decisions with limited information. You have to act quickly, and you have to be, as Christina said, very decisive. And we're used to having a lot of information in making our decisions, but we just pivoted 180 degrees, and we decided that we couldn't take 3 months to give grants away, that people needed the money immediately. And so we streamlined our approach dramatically. We decided to make it rolling grants. We decided not to ask for applications because that would take up too much time, and those organizations who are doing the good work didn't need to be spending time on applying and having a review and extreme, detailed reporting. So we changed everything about the way we're approaching this. And we got focused. As Jessica was talking about, we realized who would be adversely affected by this crisis are those who are most vulnerable, those who have been traditionally marginalized, and made the decision that the funding was going to go to those populations, that it would be, communities of color, those low income, vulnerable elders, those who are homeless, those who are food insecure, disabled, and just put that out there. That was what this fund was going to go to, and we were going to make sure that that's where we directed all of our funds in the 3 counties. And in order to find out, though, if you don't have an application, then we had to figure out how to do that. And we decided to take both staff and other community members and create ambassadors. And we are now reaching out to over 60 to 70 organizations, stakeholders, leaders in the community up and down the valley to understand what they're seeing and hearing on the ground as the needs. And we also have a listening tool. We've heard from over 200 nonprofits up and down the valley who tell us exactly what's going on in their neck of the woods and what we need to know about. And we synthesize that information, and we've distributed almost $2 million into the community. So I guess just to wrap my piece up, what I realized is there's a huge amount of trust, a huge amount of collaboration, that this is a team sport, that it couldn't be done by one person or by two people, and that we had to make decisions with limited information and trust that those dollars were going to be put to good use. And they have been. I also read early on, a number of weeks ago, a Harvard Business School article, and I can share this with Laura later, but it was talking about leaders in an emergency. Providing a vision is really important, but being able to provide context was the other really important piece about what is happening in the community right now. What are the greatest needs? What are the issues? And that everything will be okay if we do, if we work on this together. And so I thought that it's called holding. It's a psychological term. And I thought that was so, I was providing vision for staff and volunteers, but I realized I pivoted over to the vision piece too much. And I went back to thinking about what Christina was just saying about the compassion and empathy for what everyone is going through, and providing context for this particular crisis and the kinds of, what our work would be able to do in the community in that context. And that seemed to help because everyone is really struggling, both personally and professionally, to sort of stay on task and to feel okay and to keep going. So that was one thing that I found helpful. And I think what I'm finding most helpful is all of you and the people in the community who are being incredibly generous. I'm finding so much hope in the future for all of us because of this community that we live in. People are really taking care of each other, and I'm so grateful.
Thank you, Katie. And I can't emphasize enough, thank you for all that you're doing to support all these organizations and the work that they're doing out in the community. That leadership matters. And I'm seeing each of everybody on this panel. You all talked about communications being important. The way you're communicating has been really solid and really clear in a time where I've seen some really bad communications. So it's nice to see that positive leadership happening. In Leadership Pioneer Valley, we have a curriculum called Positive Leadership, and we've been talking in our communications about positive leadership, and it's just been really resonating with me. Things like resilience, things like purpose. So Joanne and others talked about purpose as being really important as leaders, understanding that, gratitude. So it just has really brought back some of our key leadership learnings. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to all of our panelists. We're not going to have a chance to break out because we've had such a robust conversation. We've recorded this, so we'll make this available to you all. I just want to also shout out to our class of 2020 and the LEAP program. You all are learning with us on how do we shift a program that is based on relationship building and face-to-face and seeing our community when we can't see our community. So I see Jennifer Rivers on, Michelle, and some others. We're gonna do a virtual drive-through graduation later this month, which I'm really excited about. So look out for that. And if you wanna, we're not gonna have the police vehicles and all of that stuff, but we will do something special for everybody. And we've got a new partnership with 2 other leadership programs. One is in Boston and the other is in the South Coast. So we'll be rolling out some more leadership development virtually. So look out for that. Things like how do we network during COVID? How do we do well-being? So something that's come up as well. And thank you to Christina for mentioning Giving Tuesday Now. like all small nonprofits, this has definitely impacted us. So your support allows us to do this work. So thank you so much. And lastly, I just want to recognize Representative Aaron Vega from Holyoke is on the call with us, and he has been a really important leader during this crisis. And I know he's stepping down from his seat, so we will really miss him, but he's been a big supporter of Leadership Pioneer Valley and has talked to our classes about education because that is something he's really passionate about. So let's end on a hopeful note. You all have been coming together in an amazing way, and this is hard, and it's going to be hard for a while. So we have to come together as community. We have to draw on that innovation. And I loved what Monte said of lean into imagination. So thank you all, and we'll see you virtually. Take care.
Thank you, Laura.